I don't know if I've ever done a video of this car with the hood off, but I wanted to briefly talk about this thing and what how this car came to be. Okay, you got to go back in time a little bit, back to 2006 or 7. And I bought it in 2007, but I had another car back then. I had a 70 Monte Carlo that I planned on putting this engine in. And I went and bought a truck, a 73 3/4 ton truck that ran. I drove it home. And my plan at the time was to get this engine out of it and just do a intake and cam, maybe change the heads, because it was a reman engine. They had Kevin Whitaker Chevrolet put this engine in this truck. I gave like $1,300 for the truck, brought it home, pulled the engine and transmission out of it. But anyway, it didn't take very long, and I decided, I probably shouldn't have went that direction, because I ended up tearing the engine all the way apart, took the heads off, took just the block to my engine builder, Richard Savage, North Carolina. And anyway, we ended up, there was nothing in this engine reused except for the block. And I had the heads up until 3 or 4 years ago, and finally sold the heads to somebody, and I think I give my engine builder the original cast iron intake. I mean, there was really nothing I could use. So I wish kind of now I just bought just a block, but hindsight's 2020. I sold the truck to somebody. I sold the 400 turbo to somebody. So I recouped some of the money, and I knew I had a good buildable engine. So a few $100s more for a whole vehicle, even if you're going to build it, sometimes it's better, because you don't know what you're getting if you just buy a block sometimes. Okay, this car was built before the LS craze. You didn't hear a lot about LS engines when I was building this car. I also wanted a big block Monte Carlo. I wanted a SS 454, replica. This is actually a 72, although it looks like a 71 SS. I built it the way I wanted to. It's just a 352 barrel car from the factory, so it doesn't matter. The car overall was a solid car, but, it wasn't perfect. This paint job's 10 years old, and it's held up well doing our process. Me and my friend done this car. My friend sprayed it, and I did. Me and him both did all the body work on it, and as you can see, I think it's held up well. 10 years, like I said, 10 years. 2020, it was painted 10 years ago in April, coming up. So, I had some things done like, that, and you can't buy a sticker like that, of course, but the Glass Tech hood. So, but what I want to say is, I'm not that old of a person, but this was my high school car. This is what I was building when I was in high school 10 years ago. I'm only 28. A lot of people think this is outdated, and maybe it is. But this car, whether you've got an LS engine or you've got a big block, if you build it the simple way with a carb, and the LS wouldn't have a distributor, but with a carburetor, it's going to drink gas, and if you run a low gear, it's going to drink gas. If you don't have overdrive, it's going to drink gas. It just don't matter. If you've got a toy, it just don't matter. If you want to get gas mileage, there's a fine line there. You got to have a very expensive computer system. You need to run. You can't run a naturally aspirated, even an LS with EFI. You got to have turbocharging, pro-charging, something where you can get on a laptop and dial that thing back down for a street tune, and then you use the EFI to help your fuel mileage. But that's really the only benefit to running an LS engine is the fuel mileage. You can buy EFI for a big block and do the same thing and get good fuel mileage with overdrive, a gear vendors, and all that kind of stuff. You can get decent fuel mileage. Not what you can get with the LS, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, if you're trying to make 2,000 horsepower, are you really worried about fuel mileage unless you're going to do drag week? So my point is, this is where it all kind of started. This might be one of the last cars that someone my age did the old school way. This car is pretty much done. This engine is very similar to the power of an over-the-counter LS7 in 1970. LS6 was a production, but you could get an LS7 over-the-counter, 454, blah, 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 high compression, and it was around 600 horsepower, maybe a little more. The LS6 was over 500. They lied for insurance reasons. This engine here will run on 93 octane pump gas. I think it's around 9.5 to 1. It may actually run on less, but I've never put regular fuel in it. I've always kept premium in it. Ethanol-free fuel is not required. It's not necessary. As long as you drive it and don't let it sit a lot. I try to keep this one drove. It drank so much gas anyway. It really, having ethanol-free don't really help you unless it's sitting. It's got a Pro Systems carb, 950 double pumper, MSD ignition, 6AL box. I'm not a guru on internals of an engine. I just know, it's got a steel crank, a scat crank, a Urson cam that's pretty decent, not extreme, and aluminum. Those are Pro Comp heads, just the cheap heads. So this engine was done on a budget for the time. From intake to oil pan at the time, and my engine builder helped me out. He didn't charge an arm and a leg on making on the parts. The long block from the intake, and we got a deal on this intake, to the oil pan was around $3,200 in 2007 to 2008 time span. So, this same engine today would probably be close to double that. Even back then, it would have been more if Richard hadn't given me such a deal on ordering the parts. He was only making 5 and 10% on these parts, where everybody else, is probably paying 20%. I was young, so he helped me out. But this intake was put on an engine and not used. This is about a $600 intake. That coating was very high, and we give like $150 for the intake. So that was the deal of the whole engine. Now, when you start tacking on accessories, and that's why, if you're figuring a car like this, building an engine, you got to figure about $10,000, especially in today's money, to do one like this, because, that's an $800 carburetor. That's a $700 ignition system. That's a $500 or $600 set of headers. This junk here, if you go with a serpentine, well, that's $1,500, but this stuff here, that's probably $300 or $400 worth of crap up here. This ain't much, but you start adding all this stuff, all the accessories, spark plug wire, and it don't take long, and you've had, it adds up. So that's the kind of stuff you don't budget in when you think about building an engine. So anyway, like, share, comment. Again, pretty much this is an old school millennial built hot rod. For as long as I have the car, it's gonna stay that way. I've had it my whole life, basically my whole teenage and adult life now, so I don't really plan on getting rid of it. Everything has a price, but it probably means more to me than it does anybody else. This was also basically the first car I built from basically the ground up. I didn't take the body off the frame, but I pretty much did everything else. So it's been a fun experience having the car. It's been trying at times for sure, but sometimes I think it's almost like this thing might be cursed. But that's probably with all the projects out there. So good luck on what you decide to do. If you're young and you're watching this, don't be afraid of this stuff. This stuff ain't ancient technology. This stuff was just a few years ago. It was good then. It's good now, and you can still build this stuff, and it's not that bad. If you want to go the LS route, go for it. But I guess the cheapest thing to do is, if you could get a deal on an LS engine, turbocharge it, keep the electronics for so you have some decent drivability, and better fuel mileage. But otherwise, if you don't want to fool the electronics, put a carburetor on it. I'm amazed that I've talked to people who don't know anything about a carburetor. It just, they don't know none of that. And I'm like, what? I don't understand. You need to know how this operates before you know how EFI operates, because this better understands that. Also, for all-out racing purposes, you can't beat a carb. It's been proven time and time again. So, again, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit of insight on my high school built hot rod that I actually still have. Although I'm not 60 years old and built it in the 70s, this car was built in the 2000s. So anyway, see you next time. Thanks for watching.